All right. Well, let's talk then. Hey, everybody. I'm super happy that you're able to join us. I'm Jeremiah Bentley. I'm the chair of Emerging Leaders. I'm fresh off my first post-COVID haircut, which is why I'm sitting in my car and not driving. So I wanted to make sure everybody know that I was being safe there, and we did it with a mask. So I'm feeling really good and strong about that. During the day, I'm the vice president of marketing and community affairs at Texas Mutual Insurance Company. So we do everything from advertising to PR to social media to all of our community work. And I'm almost 6 years into being on the United Way board of directors, and I've had the chance to serve with Mark and work with David and this great team. And my term is almost up, and I'm really sad about that because there's just like not a better organization in town to be associated with. So the reason I'm giving these remarks is because of Texas Mutual Insurance Company is the presenting sponsor of the Emerging Leaders program. We just really believe, and we've got at least one and maybe a couple people on too that are part of this, but we really just believe in, in community and the work that United Way does in the community, and really in like growing up the next generation of leaders, both within our company and within Austin as a whole. So we're really excited for y'all to join us and be a part of this and be a part of the programming and get in early. We're just really getting our feet wet because we launched late last year, and obviously we've had some challenges, but we're really excited about the program we have to offer. And I really want to thank Jennifer, who's been amazing about putting this kind of stuff together. So hope you'll really get a lot out of today. I'd also like to recognize David Smith, the CEO of United Way, who's on the call with us, and I'm going to give him a chance to say a few words too.
Thanks, Jeremiah. And just so nobody fears, Jeremiah is rolling off the board, which is very sad, but he also is going to sit off a year and then come back. And now I've said this, and I'm pretty sure Jennifer's recording it, it's forever. But we're very glad Jeremiah's back. It's so good to see all of you. Thank you for joining us. Mark Strama is always a draw, and so grateful to Jeremiah and Texas Mutual for all their support in making this possible. Jennifer, again, thanks. Jennifer Wood, you're amazing, and thanks for pulling us all together. But y'all are in for a real treat to have Aisha and Mark talking together. I can tell you every time I have had talked to Mark, I always walk away just feeling really good about life, and I'm so glad that he is with us. I wanted to start off just by sharing with you all something that we as an organization put together and sent out. But just with everything going on in the world, I don't know of anything more important, and I want to keep speaking up, and I want us as an organization to keep standing with what I think will be the right side of history. And so I just wanted to read and share with you all something that we wrote as an organization that I'm always going to be proud to be able to share. We want to take a moment to acknowledge what is happening in the communities across the U.S. All of us are grieving the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, and thousands of other Black Americans impacted by recent acts of racism and violence. Poverty and racism are so interconnected, we can't address one without the other. What we can do is speak up, double down on our mission to fight poverty, and support each other every step of the way. These issues are too important for us to do anything else. Every day, we are building a community with more opportunity as we reimagine systems so that everyone can reach their full potential. We will keep listening, learning, unlearning, and doing better in pursuit of justice and racial equity. Our hope is that our gathering today will be a space for connection where we can support each other. So with that said, we're really glad that all of you are here and glad that all of you are joining arms and hands with us in this effort. So thank you. Jeremiah, back to you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, David. It's been a really tough week, I think, for everybody, and really that's all the more reason why we appreciate y'all giving us some time out of your day to listen to this and be inspired too. I'm gonna turn most of this over to Aisha Morton, but I think this is probably relevant to Mark's discussion. So before he was at Google Fiber, Mark was a state rep, and he was my state representative when I lived in Northeast Austin. And, you know, I know people get into politics for various motivations, but I always felt like Mark, like he was always open and caring and listening and interested in problem solving, and like was just always in it for the right reasons. And he was inspiring to me then. And I'm really happy to be able to be on the board with him now. So I just wanted to throw that out there too. And with that, I'll turn it over to Aisha Morton, who's currently a recruiter for Google, but before that, she spent 6 years in the nonprofit space. And now she's in tech, and she's got a few things that she wants to share about emerging leaders and about how we support United Way's mission.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into our first virtual Lunch with Leaders. As Jeremiah mentioned, my name is Aisha Morton. I am currently a member of the executive leaders, the executive committee, which is part of the Emerging Leaders. And I want to tell you first a little bit about Emerging Leaders. So Emerging Leaders brings aspiring leaders together to support the United Way for Greater Austin. We support the United Way through philanthropy, advocacy, and volunteerism. More specifically, Emerging Leaders supports the United Way's mission to fight poverty by investing in the Family Pathways program. The Family Pathways program is a program that provides services to parents and their children in order to disrupt the cycle of intergenerational poverty. As you all probably know, the United Way has committed to fighting poverty, and that fight's not new. The United Way has been in this work for about 95 years, and they continued this fight through COVID-19. So when the pandemic hit, this organization responded quickly by answering 4 times the number of 211 calls, rethinking their Census 2020 strategy, and by launching the Altogether ATX Fund in partnership with the Austin Community Foundation. Today, we're proud to share that the Altogether ATX Fund raised more than $6 million to support COVID relief. And we'd like to thank all who donated as well as volunteered their time to review those grant applications. So now on to the main event, if you will. Mark, I'd like to introduce you all to our speaker, Mark Strama. As Jeremiah mentioned, Mark has made philanthropy the cornerstone of his career. He was a 5-term state representative, currently a Google Fiber executive, and a United Way board leader. Mark, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you all for having me, and thanks all of you for being here. I'm excited to be a part of, my favorite part of what I did in politics was working with emerging leaders. So I'm really glad to be with y'all.
Well, Mark, my first question for you is, as we've now mentioned a couple of times, you ran for office. Can you tell us a little bit about your decision to run for office and what inspired your commitment to public service?
I can, although I do so at the risk of disabusing Jeremiah of his theory of my noble intentions when I ran. Because I ran because I was pissed. I mean, it's like their story, my story of politics it's not a shining idealistic story. I had been a legislative staffer. My first job out of college in 1990 was working on Ann Richards' campaign for governor. Through that experience, I met a newly elected state senator from Houston named Rodney Ellis, and he gave me a job that was the best job I ever had, which was from 1991 to 95, I was his chief of staff. It was better than being a state representative. It was better than the time I spent in Los Angeles working at Rock the Vote, working with rock stars to get young people engaged in politics. It was better even than working at Google, which is one of the best places in the world to work. And it was great because it was great for one reason, because of something we'll talk about later, which is the mentorship relationship that I got to benefit from with Senator Ellis. And it was great because I didn't have to do any of the BS of politics. It was a pure policy job. I got to be deeply immersed in the details of policy, which you actually don't get to do when you're a politician. And I got to work on this incredible array of really important issues that I cared passionately about. It was great. I then left. I did this job at Rock the Vote. I then started a company to do online voter registration. In 2003, there was a big fight in the Texas legislature, which I no longer worked in, but I was following it from afar. And there was a big fight over what, at the time, we've since crossed many more Rubicons in terms of bad politics, but at the time I thought it was the worst political abuse I'd ever seen. And it was a push to redraw the district boundaries in Texas, the congressional district boundaries, because the 2002 elections had not gone the way the majority in the state legislature wanted them to go. And they wanted to tilt the playing field more to the advantage of the side that controlled the Texas legislature. We're a nonpartisan organization, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you who was doing what, because there's no way to tell the story coherently that doesn't name the parties. The Republicans had gotten their first majority in the Texas legislature since Reconstruction. And they got that majority in the Texas legislature, and they wanted to use it to them when they were in the minority. And redistricting was a way for them to try to get in their minds, get the playing field back to level. But you do redistricting only after a decennial census. The purpose of redistricting isn't, although you would be justified in perceiving that it isn't for political parties to try to gain a competitive advantage against each other. The purpose of redistricting is because every 10 years we count where people live. And what we find is that population has shifted where it lives. And if you draw the districts, you end up with some districts that have a lot of people and some districts that have a few people. And that violates the principle of one person, one vote. Because your vote counts less if you're in a district with 600,000 voters than if you're in a district with 300,000 voters, right? So redistricting originally was called reapportionment. It's reapportioning the population among districts so you have an equal number of people in all of them. It's never, until 2003, it had never been done for any reason other than to reapportion so that you have an equal number of voters in each district. But once you start that process, it becomes highly politicized, and it becomes this warfare where they try to stack, where whatever party controls the redistricting process tries to stack the deck. Okay, that's a long wind up, but this is why I ran for office. In 2003, for the first time, the legislature did redistricting just to change the balance of power, not to reapportion. We already had an equal number of voters in each district, just because they didn't like the way the outcomes of the elections in 2002. And I watched it, and I was appalled that we would use politics for such crass partisan purposes. Redistricting was crass and partisan before 2003. It was. But it had never been done without the pretext, without the exigence of the new census data. And now it was only crass and partisan, and it just felt like an egregious abuse of power to me. I had been out of politics since 1995. I had been working on the margins of politics, working in voter registration, working in voter activism, but I had not been actively involved in politics. I took a look at it happening. I was really angry. And I moved back. At the time I was living in Washington, D.C. I was traveling all the time for business. And I was part of a company, a growing startup that was in the election technology space. But I dropped it. I moved back to Austin. I moved into the district of an incumbent state legislator who had been a significant part of the problem. It was a gerrymandered district, as so many of them are. It was a district with sort of a 57% Republican voting tendency, and I ran as a Democrat against an incumbent Republican. That's a hard race to win, but I saw some opportunities there because the incumbent had done some things to make him not as popular. He was pretty corrupt. I mean, I ran. I'll go further in diminishing Jeremiah's polite, such kind interpretation of me. I ran the most negative campaign for state representative that had ever been run up to that point. The guy, and then 10 years after I barely won that race, I won it by 500 votes out of 70,000. 10 years later, the guy that I ran against, who had been out of public office but stayed around, he ended up on the front page of the newspapers for a week because of some corrupt stuff he was doing in a state agency. And I called my brother, who had been sort of the consigliere in my campaign that had been so negative, and I said, it's amazing that you run the most negative campaign that's ever been run for state representative, and reflect on years later and you say, I really didn't say enough nasty things about that guy. He was much worse than I said. That's how I got in. It was no noble genesis. It was anger and an incumbent who was part of the problem and vulnerable because of his tendency to abuse power.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I still think it's an inspiring story because passion sparked you to run for office is what I hear.
I'll take that.
Well, given your passion and commitment to public service, it surprised many people when you made the decision to take a step back from politics and work for Google. Can you talk about what sparked that career change?
I can. It was an interesting story, and you'll appreciate as a Googler kind of how this went down. But I had been there. Okay, so I got elected in 2004. First 6 years of the experience were great. I was meeting a lot of people. I was getting to work on policy, and while my side was deeply in the minority in the Texas legislature, our power felt like it was ascendant. My election in 2004 was the first time Democrats had net gained a seat in the Texas House of Representatives since Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. When Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act and famously said, we've given up the South for a generation, in the Texas legislature. 2004 was the first year we gained a seat. 2006, we gained more. 2008, the Obama election, we gained more, to the point where the partisan makeup of the Texas House of Representatives after the 2008 election was 76-74 Republicans to Democrats. It was almost evenly balanced. I got named, D on economic development and technology. I got to work on material stuff and have an impact on the state of Texas. That was my experience in the 2009 legislative session. 2010, Obama has just passed universal health care, or let's call it Obamacare. Wasn't exactly universal, and there is the Tea Party rebellion against the Obama administration. 2010 was a wipeout year. Big Republican landslide in the congressional off-year elections. That was a big story nationally. It was even more pronounced in Texas. We went from 76-74 to 101-49 in the 2010 elections. A 2-to-1 Republican majority. And I'm a Democrat. At that point, 2011 session, 2013 session, to be honest, and again to diminish Jeremiah's view of me, a cinder block could have sat in my chair in the Texas House of Representatives and had the same impact on public policy. It was not a constructive use of my time. And I did not want to spend my time in a job where the most I could do was write a press release and vote no, And so I announced in 2013 at the very beginning of the session that I was going to leave the state house. And I was thinking at that time that I was going to run for mayor. I think I was viewed as competitive for the seat, But I have to tell you, I didn't have fire in my belly to be mayor. I've always worked on state policy issues. I'm passionate about issues like education, renewable energy, criminal justice reform. And the mayor's job is, I would say, if I can use the word, don't tell him I ever said this, but it's a little more mundane than that, right? Like the mayor's job. And so I just didn't have passion about, some of the growth and planning and, stuff that the mayor works on. Then Google announces in April of 2013 that it's going to bring a fiber network to Austin, and I go to the announcement, and I run into an old friend who worked at Google, but I hadn't seen him in a long time. Now, if I had run for mayor, I think I had a fighting chance, but there was this one woman in Austin who would have done anything to prevent me from being mayor. She was a formidable, person to have working against you, because she's a former City Hall reporter for one of the local TV stations. She's really, a persuasive and powerful and smart person. And I know this woman really well because we've been married for 14 years. And so I invited my friend from Google to dinner the night that they announced they were coming here. And we're talking about whether I should run for mayor. And he says, if you don't want to be mayor, we're going to need somebody to run Google Fiber for us here. Maybe you'd be interested in that. And my wife said, he'll take it. And that's how that led to the series of events that brought me to Google Fiber, which has been a really great experience.
Well, as a Googler, I guess I can tell your wife thank you. So for those of you who didn't know before, and I think Mark mentioned this, he founded newvoter.com, the first company to enable Americans to register to vote online. Since then, more than 700,000 people have used the platform to register to vote, which I think is absolutely incredible. Mark, some of us are aspiring entrepreneurs. Can you talk about some of the lessons you learned while founding newvoter.com?
Yes, we actually registered 700,000 people in the year 2000, which was 1,000 too few for my politics, but it was close. And since then, online voter registration has become pretty commonplace, although Texas is a state, much as I tried to change this when I was a legislator, Texas is a state that still doesn't let you have a completely virtual voter registration process. I had no experience doing startups before that. So I had my entire experience up to that was government and nonprofit. So I learned business literally while I was bootstrapping that company. I would go to Book People and sit in their cafe and read books about business that I then didn't buy because I was so bootstrapped. I was so like we didn't have any money, and so that was kind of how I put it together. Now I was lucky. I had some really good advisors, and I did have a great political network, given that the business was in the political space. My first client, believe it or not, our model was to get other websites to host this voter registration tool we bought. My first client was the Republican National Committee. I haven't talked about it, but I spent this time at Rock the Vote, which is a nonpartisan 501c3 organization. And I did develop from that experience really, really significant connections in the Republican Party, close personal friends with Kevin McCarthy, who now, he and I shared tickets to Dodgers games when I lived in LA in 1996. He's now the Republican leader in the House of Representatives, which I find amazing. But at the time, the reason we were friends back then is he was president of the Young Republican National Federation at the time, and that they had we did work with them at Rock the Vote. And so I had a good network to start a company in the political space, and it got off to a fast start and got quickly acquired. Now look, this was the 1998-1999 dot-com period, the period that is referred to as the irrational exuberance of the dot-com boom, and it was nuts. And actually, I can say, though I didn't know squat about business, I had an instinct that this was like false, like that the whole foundation was phony, and it was. And venture capitalists would say to me, you need a business model that loses more money, right? You need to be hyper-focused on growth. You need to spend a ton of money early. You don't have to worry about monetizing. You don't have to worry about profit. You just have to get real estate and eyeballs. And if you grow those things, there will be plenty of capital to invest in you, and you can ride that way for a long time. And that was true for Google, and that was true for Amazon, and it was true for a few other huge home runs. And for all the other companies that took that advice, they got wiped out when the bubble burst in 2001. And actually in 2000. We didn't take that advice. We were lean, and we stayed lean, and we grew enough to be acquired by another company that, Kaisha, that maybe the lesson I learned was avoid the short, the home run. Don't, avoid the flavor of the moment. We kind of tried to develop a business around sound business fundamentals, kind of like the same things you would have done as a business pre-internet. And it was good enough to get us through the bubble bursting when even a healthy business suffered because the economy just took a steep downturn. And it was good enough to get us ultimately acquired by Accenture, which was a good exit for us. And that was what freed me up to run for office in 2004.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So many of us know that mentorship often plays a huge role in professional success. Can you tell us about your experience with mentors? And do you have any advice for us on either seeking a mentor or creating a mutually rewarding mentor-mentee relationship?
I'm so glad that we get to talk about this, because this, especially with y'all. So I mentioned that I had this incredibly fortunate experience of going to work for Rodney Ellis in 1991. Rodney and I had very different backgrounds. He was, I had a pretty entitled suburban upbringing. Rodney grew up the son of a yard man and a maid, who then went on to get a law degree from the University of Texas and a degree from the LBJ School at the University of Texas. And he became chief of staff to a member of Congress named Mickey Leland in the 80s. Mickey was a very prominent African-American member of Congress who died in a plane crash on an aid mission in Africa. He was the leading voice for aid to Africa when he was in Congress, among a few other things. His seat was Barbara Jordan's old seat. Rodney was Mickey's chief of staff, and they were best friends. They were roommates and best friends. And frankly, the circumstances of Mickey's death led to Rodney getting elected to the state senate. The state senator got elected to Mickey's seat in Congress. Rodney got elected to that state senate seat. Mickey had propelled Rodney's career in politics. And when Rodney got elected, there was this hole in his life from Mickey not being there. And I happened to be there for that, which was amazing. So, for some reason, and I don't know why, he filled that hole with me. I don't know why. So, that was a really big deal for me. For 5 years, I will say, I worked my butt off for him. He was a demanding boss, and I put everything I had into that job. It was a 75% black district, And the biggest thing that we worked on when I was there was actually, in light of what's going on today, we did not at that time focus a lot on police reform. We focused a lot on the indigent defense system for people accused of crimes in Texas, which is still bad, but at the time was atrocious. We worked on that a lot, and I got him interested in some environmental issues, and he became a leading voice in the legislature on environmental issues. I learned everything from him. It's amazing how emotional I am about it, but I just don't know how to convey to you what an opportunity it was. And he taught me everything I know about politics and stuff no amount of graduate studies could have taught me what I learned from Rodney. So I got that experience. When I got elected, actually before I got elected, when I ran for office, I was getting outspent by a lot of money. I was in a district where the deck was stacked against me, and I was running against an incumbent. All very unfavorable circumstances when you're a candidate. One of the things we did to try to gain an upper hand was we created this program called Campaign Academy, where we recruited 30 kids, high school and college age kids, to spend their entire summer volunteering on interning for my campaign. But basically, we fed them lunch and dinner, and they spent 10 hours a day in the midsummer Texas heat knocking on doors. 30 people knocking on doors all summer. Now, we called it Campaign Academy because every day we brought in lunch and we brought in killer guest speakers. Ann Richards was a guest speaker. We brought in Hollywood producers. We brought in big name national political consultants, big name national journalists. I mean, big names. The chair of the Democratic Party. We brought, all kind. The daily lunches were amazing. For an hour a day, they got a great education about politics. For the remaining 8 hours of the day, we relentlessly exploited their labor. And they knocked on 30,000 doors. And it was, without doubt, it was just this incredibly effective political strategy. But what I found my favorite thing about it was I did it every year. By the time I left public office, there were 150 kids who would tell you they got their start in politics through the Mark Strama Campaign Academy. They had these awesome T-shirts that said, Mark Strama Campaign Academy, all work, no pay. And on the back it said, I worked all summer for Mark Strama and all I got was this lousy T-shirt. And look, the training part was so good. The educational component of it was so good that when they knocked on your door, these 16, 17, sometimes 20-year-old kids, they were incredibly effective because they could answer any question. They knew, they had stories. They left the program legitimately knowledgeable about things that most people don't get much exposure to, the intricacies of politics. The greatest thing about it was, at the end, now there's 150 people out in the world who will, I think most of them would say, that's where I learned about and got started in politics. One of them is now a member. One of them is now the youngest member of the Texas House of Representatives, James Tallarico. And he is not just the youngest member, but I would say one of the very most talented. And if you get a chance to watch his political career, it's going to be great. A bunch of them are Teach for America, Aisha. A bunch of them have made impacts in the nonprofit world. A bunch of them are crushing it in business. And so the last part of your question was, what advice do I have for you about it? I give this advice to young people a lot. I don't know if anybody ever takes me up on it, but be intentional about seeking a mentor. Don't be afraid to go to a potential mentor, a person whose career you admire, and say that to them and ask them, Don't be afraid to do that. I think I think that I know, like, most people don't do that, and most people never get asked to be a mentor, and most people would welcome it. So that's my advice on that.
Thank you so much for showing us that, and for being authentic in your emotion about your experience with Rodney. I think it really sends the message that mentorship is extremely important and can be quite impactful. Yes, as a teacher, I did have a few students who were in a similar program. I can't say it was yours, but where they got to volunteer with state representatives, and they spoke the world of programs like that. So thank you.
Yeah, I learned long after I started that program that pretty much every state rep had a campaign academy.
Yeah, that's what I gathered.
Yeah.
So you touched on this a little bit, but can you tell us why philanthropy is important to you and what impact it had on your life and career?
Yeah, I mean, as I'm thinking about it, I think the reason I'm so emotional talking about Rodney is that was 5 years of my life that I spent working in the African American community. You know, I was at Black churches every Sunday. I met Rodney in a Black church on a Black church tour with Ann Richards. And what's going on in the world right now, I mean, there's no way to talk about this question without talking about what's going on right now. And David's right that you can't separate it from the 2Gen work that we do at United Way. There's some unique elements to the problem of police reform that aren't distinctly or aren't entirely inextricable from the poverty problem, but at the end of the day, if you could wipe out the poverty problem, you'd be a long way toward solving the justice issues that have people on the streets now. The other question, though, is why don't the poverty problem? Why is this the issue? With like, why are we unable? Here's the right way to frame that. Why are we unable to catalyze this level of response on an issue like poverty or wealth inequality, right? Like, what are we not doing? What are we not communicating? What are people not understanding about the problem that United Way is trying to solve that prevents us? Because I actually, as sad as I am about the state of the country right now, I actually believe meaningful reform is going to come from the 10 days of activism that we've seen. I don't feel like we're making any progress systemically on poverty. I mean, I feel like that's not to say that we're not making progress through our philanthropy, but systemic reform to address poverty, I don't feel like the political system is moving in the right direction. So let's see, how do I connect all that back to the question? I mean, this is why philanthropy is important. I assume this is why all of you joined. You're spending your time on a United Way Emerging Leaders Board. There's lots of other organizations you can do it with. There's lots of other, there's business groups you could be spending your time with. But I assume we're all kind of motivated by that same intrinsic purpose. And then the question becomes tactically, what's the best expenditure of your time if your goal is to move the needle on these issues? Because I've been a little bit pessimistic about the political institutional reforms needed, United Way does feel to me like a super high impact way in a world where the big problems feel intractable. You can feel very good about moving the needle in all the ways that the United Way moves the needle every day. And that when I think hopefully Kaisha, I answered both of the last couple of questions on the list. I hope I left time for Q&A, but I'm not sure that I did. I talked a lot.
No, you did. I was just thinking like, oh, Mark is on top of it. You did answer my next question. And I don't have the answer to your question about how we make a true impact on systemic poverty, but I certainly hope that our work through the United Way could be a part of that solution. So thank you for mentioning that. We're now going to open up for questions. Jennifer is going to help us to share the questions that are maybe in the chat, but please feel free to unmute and ask Mark questions that you have.
Hi, I'm so excited that we have time for questions, like listening to you, Mark. My name is Sherry Mendoza. I'm actually on the Executive Committee for Women United, and I'm very appreciative for Emerging Leaders for allowing us to watch your talk. Man, your passion for what you do, it's got me fired up. I love how you were saying, oh, I might hinder Jeremiah's view of me, but honestly, it just took what his view was and elevated it. Just so passionate and helping people, and it's really hard sometimes to see politicians wanting to do something to actually help the people that they serve, and that's what you're doing. A lot of times it's a different agenda, and I mean, yeah, a lot of times people join the military or run for office because they're pissed off and they want to see the change in the world. And also with the vulnerability that you shared with us, it just further justifies that, hey, you're a real person here to help change what you can. And as a woman of color, as someone that is in this fight, I really, really appreciate it. And same thing with you, David, for talking about what's going on right now in this world and using your talents, your passion, your time, and I'm going to say it, your privilege as a white man in society to help give voices to people that look like me and the others that are at a disadvantage. So thank you. But the question, I had a couple, I'll try and make it quick. You were talking about redistricting in the beginning. I just wanted to get the difference between, what's the difference between redistricting and gerrymandering?
Same. Well, unfortunately, it's the same.
Okay.
Gerrymandering so, as I said, there is an inescapable need to do redistricting. It has to be done. There was a 1960 Supreme Court case called Baker v. Carr, and that case was about rural versus urban. What was happening was district boundaries were staying unchanged as rural folks were moving into cities. And so you had these rural congressional districts that only had like 100,000 people in them. And the urban congressional districts would have 500,000, 600,000. Well, that's an imbalance that's obviously not fair because your vote doesn't count as much if there are 500,000 people in the district as if there are 100,000. So Baker v. Carr articulated the principle in a gender-specific way that we would now hopefully avoid, called one man, one vote. And it said after the census every 10 years, we have to redraw the districts so that there's an equal number in each district. That is a constitutional requirement by the interpretation of Baker v. Carr. That is benign. That is good. Once you start drawing the boundaries, which is redistricting, how you draw the boundaries, even if you're guided by the fundamental principle, equal number of people in each district, one person, one vote. Still, it's the case that if I draw it this way instead of this way, it has a different outcome. It can have a different outcome in who wins the election. Because we don't know how any individual votes. When an election is over, we can look at each precinct and we can see whether its tendency leans one way or the other. And as computers and technology has gotten better and better, we can do that now with exquisite precision. And so now, back then they would just kind of roughly sit over a map and figure out kind of, hey, I want, a bunch of good old boys would sit in a room and one would say, hey, I got to make sure I have that neighborhood over there in my district. Those people love me. Or I definitely don't want all those liberals in Central Austin in my district. Or, keep the African-American vote east of I-35 out of my district. I'll never win there, whatever, right? Those were the kinds of discussions they'd have, and it was kind of done with broad brushstrokes. Now, in the age of big data and computers, it's done with infinitesimal surgical precision. And that's why you get districts that look so ridiculous, right? And so when you look at a map of congressional districts or state legislative districts, it's ridiculous looking. And the reason is because they have used data analytics to carve those districts to achieve a predestined outcome. And 90% of elections, we know who's going to win before a single voter votes. That's what was so rare about my district, is that it was close enough. And there's a backstory on why. They could have gerrymandered Travis County to be, which at the time had 6 state reps. They could have gerrymandered it when the Republicans controlled the legislative process and could gerrymander at their will. They could have gerrymandered 4 Democratic districts and 2 Republican districts, because Travis County is still a majority Democrats. But they wanted to get 3 Republican and 3 Democrat. There weren't enough Republican voters in Travis County to give them 3 safe Republican districts. So they carved them, instead of being 60% Republican, they tried to make them like 57% Republican. And that was just close enough to give me a chance. So what I needed to add to that was I had to be very successful persuading some swing voters, and I had to register some of the folks who historically didn't vote and get them to vote. That's what Campaign Academy was so effective for, because that's a feet on the streets job, and we were able to get that done. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, and I really like it. I totally get what's going on with that, and yeah. And then just one more quick question. I love how you're saying you're pessimistic. I totally feel that. You won't meet a more pessimistic person than a millennial. We lived through a housing crash, 2 recessions, a million wars, Trump, all that stuff. So I totally get it. But as young people in this current climate, especially with Black Lives Matter, the federal court striking down the vote by mail in Texas literally yesterday, and everything that's going on, what is your advice to us, for those of us in the field trying to disrupt the societal norms and force change, and how can non-POC use their privilege to help us?
Let me take the second question first. I think one of the reasons I'm very emotional when I talk about Rodney right now is because it's very hard for me to be mostly out of politics at a time when it's clearly so important. And I really don't have a good answer to the question of what's the best way I can personally have an impact right now. It's very hard for me to find the middle ground, right? There was an all-in period of my life, and I loved it, and I was passionate about it. It's not where I am now. I've got young kids. I'm just kind of I don't see the political system right now as a great channel for change. That's the wrong way to think about it. And when you said that, I know I said the word pessimistic, but when you said it, it kind of hurt me. So I know I said it myself, but I hate hearing it. But I'm trying to find my own way to live my life and still have an impact, and I haven't found that sweet spot. Like I said, United Way right now is my input. The first half of the question was, I think I've forgotten, but anyway, I hope that.
Yeah, no worries.
Well, thank you so much, Cherry, for your questions, and Mark for your, again, authenticity as you answer all of our questions. We are pretty much at time, so if you have additional questions for Mark, for those of us on the call, please feel free to email them to Jennifer. She will send them to Mark so that we can follow up. I'm now going to turn the conversation back over to Jeremiah. Mark, thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Sure, thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, and I will make this super quick. And Mark, I still stand by my opinion that you were a great state rep. And what we worked on was we were fighting these landfills in East Austin. It was very much the same. Like, we got crushed at every turn, and we got super disappointed, but you at least pretended to be optimistic enough that we never gave up hope, that we would get the right outcome. So I've always appreciated that about it. Really appreciate your message, and your story and what you shared. And and have learned a lot. And I want to thank again everybody for sharing their time with us today and hearing about this talk and this issue. I know we've talked about it a lot. The systems are really what hold us down, and nobody more than United Way is really positioned to be able to help work in those systems and help make change for the community overall with everything that's going on. So really appreciate the work that the team is doing. And for those of you that are already Emerging Leaders members, thank you very much for supporting the work and the things that we're doing. If you're not, please visit the website, and I think Jennifer either has or will put the link in. Oh, look, it's like on cue. The link is in the chat. You can learn more and donate today. So to be an emerging leader, it's $1,000 or more annually, which is $84 a month. And we'd love to see y'all at our next event. We're planning those. We're going to try to have a variety of them to keep people engaged. So please continue checking the website for more information. And if you would like to know more, you can always get a hold of Jennifer Woods, jennifer.woods@uwatx.org. So just thanks again. Everybody have a great day, and everybody, what did they say? Everybody be the change you want to see in the world. So thank y'all for your time.